One problem experienced by buyers in competitive markets is that of having to pay hundreds of dollars each for multiple building and pest inspections and strata reports. These bills can rack up fast after being outbid a number of times, and some buyers end up giving up and purchasing without having done this basic due diligence. One alternative is to get the vendor to pay. Another is to share the cost amongst numerous interested buyers. But are either of these really a great solution for an individual buyer? Can these reports be trusted?
Welcome to The Elephant in the Room. This is the podcast where we love to talk about the big things in property that never usually get talked about. I'm Veronica Morgan, real estate agent, buyer's agent and buyer's agent mentor, co-host of Foxtel's Location Australia, author of Auction Ready and co-host of Your First Home Buyer Guide.
And I'm Chris Bates, mortgage broker, recently ranked number 5 in Australia out of over 18,000 brokers in the annual MPA Top 100 Mortgage Broker Awards. Before we get started, I need to let you know that nothing we say here can be taken as personal advice. We always recommend you engage the services of an appropriate and experienced professional.
Technology is increasingly providing solutions to property problems, and there have been a few prop tech firms who have tackled the challenge of making pre-purchase inspections more affordable and accessible. One solution has been to create a marketplace for pre-purchase inspections, and today we're chatting to Rhys Rogers, the co-founder and CEO of property technology Before You Bid. Rhys started out his professional career as an insolvency accountant before delving into creating a startup in the property space, and since launching 8 years ago, Before You Bid has grown to be the largest marketplace for building and pest and strata inspectors. The platform now helps over 100,000 people buy and sell property every year and aims to be the home of property compliance and due diligence. This should be interesting. Now, we can see there are definite pros and cons of this approach. Thank you so much for joining us today, Rhys, as I expect this will be quite a robust discussion.
Yes, I'm looking forward to it. I was warned, Veronica, you're not afraid of asking the hard questions. I'm very keen to be put on the barbecue.
Good one.
Rhys, I mean, anyone who's gone to transact in the property market, you know, the problem you're solving, I guess people can very quickly feel that pain, right? They've gone and looked at multiple properties, they've got multiple reports, etc. Is that sort of where this initial idea came from? You went through that process, and is it something that I guess vendors have flipped and said, well, hang on a sec, we need to be providing this report now? There's kind of like, rather than just relying on the buyers doing all their own due diligence, do you think the tide's turned and the powers, the vendors are actually taking that up?
Yeah, a lot of questions in there, Chris, but I'll start with how it started. Everyone thinks I must have been buying and gone through this painful experience of spending, hundreds of dollars every time on a building pest. It actually was very different to that. I had a real estate agent. We were selling a property for a house that was foreclosed by the bank at this insolvency firm I was working at. And he was complaining to me about opening up a property twice for different building and pest inspectors and wasting an hour of his day each time. I said, oh, why don't they share it? He said, the first person doesn't ever get anything back, so they don't bother making it available. Well, that was kind of the light bulb moment. So we grabbed my brother. I said, look, I feel like there's a market inefficiency here. I always knew I was going to start a business at some point. It's like this. I tested 3 or 4 terrible ideas, actually. But one was going to apparently take on Amazon, one in poker, which I was playing at the time. Anyway, so I went to him and I showed him, and we came up with this consumer kind of cashback share cost model. Built that out for 6 months overseas, and we launched. And that, funnily enough, that's made a big comeback in our business. But within a month or two of, I was speaking to a few agents, they're like, if you could make this available through our channel, we would get our vendors to pay a little bit. So then I really focused on that agent channel, which, from an agent's and vendor's perspective, it's, less time opening up the property for multiple inspections. And a big part of it's the agent singing from the same hymn sheet as the buyers of what's, wrong with the property, as opposed to, potentially the buyer having information the agent's got no idea about. And vice versa. It's just not a good interaction if there's competing info coming from each side.
It's an interesting one, because the idea of a share economy to defray pre-purchase costs is sort of, you go, oh, of course, it's a no-brainer. But at the same time, often, these buyers are in competition with each other, right? So often the access to that information or the quality of that information is an advantage, or gives an advantage to one buyer over another. Or conversely, sometimes in my business, being a buyer's agent and knowing that not all building and pest inspectors, for argument's sake, are equal, I feel like sometimes my clients are at a disadvantage because they know way more about a property that I know other buyers are aware of. So the idea that, and I do know that when I was a sales agent, for example, in the olden days before there was such a service, that we would have to go to properties and sit there and wait for each buyer. If you were lucky enough to have 10 buyers on a property, fantastic. You didn't complain too much because you knew that they were committed. But at the same time, you're thinking nobody would want to share that information with anyone else. They wanted to make sure that everybody else had delays. And if you put an offer in on a property, you, as a buyer's agent, when I first started as a buyer's agent, I knew that if I had all my ducks in a row and I'd done our building and pest, that to give access to that to somebody else would potentially put them in a position where they could compete with us. And I didn't want them to do that, particularly if I was making an offer. So that is sort of interesting that you came at it not from the buyer's pain, but from the seller's pain. I could totally see that.
That was the starting conversation. It was definitely around that. Sorry, you're about to ask a question.
Yeah, because I actually had a look through your Google reviews. And look, I've got opinions of the service. I think the service on face value is a very good idea. And I think where it could fall apart is, you're at the mercy, you're a marketplace, so therefore your brand's on the front door, but you're at the mercy of the quality of the inspectors that are on your platform. And also I imagine they've got different pricing structures and they've got different levels of communication with their purchasers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's all these differences in terms of their service delivery that could impact on your brand. And so I thought, I'm going to have a look at your Google reviews and see what's going on there. And it's like you either get 1 star or 5 star.
It's very up and down, that's for sure. And the ones that generally are about the inspector, but they're talking about our marketplace, so it's hard for us to compete with them. But to go into that, and there's so much we're building around the transparency in the inspector, and to commoditize is the wrong word, but we wanted to get to a point where someone can download our report and know that whether they download it from Joe Blogg's, inspector or Chris Bates' inspector, that they're going to get fairly similar information. Now, that's going to take us time. It's probably a lot easier in strata reports if, that's the first thing we're going to delve into it, or from a text perspective on our side. But it is hard when you've got different inspectors at different, they think even a certain defect might be, a major defect, while another inspector will be like, no, that doesn't rate as a major defect in my mind. So, all we're trying to, build and constantly focus on is transparency around who the inspector is. We'll have ratings of each inspector launching in 2024 as well. That gives the ability to go, okay, do I want to download this report off this inspector, or do I want to go and get one for another one in the marketplace? So the one thing I would say, if you go on Google and just say, I want to build a pest inspector in Balmain, you're maybe not Balmain's a bad example, but Westpac did the study 8 years ago now, and they found that 70% of building and pest inspectors weren't appropriately insured to do building and pest inspection reports. Now, we actually, as our onboarding experience, say you have to show us your certificate of currency, and then we analyse whether they actually can do a building and pest inspection report. So that's a big, and I can't tell you how many times we go into a new market and we go, the inspectors, and we look them up and they're all happy. Yeah, we want to go on before you bid. We've heard something good about you. Yep, some other inspectors told us you can get work off this platform. And then we go, great, just send us through X, Y, and Z, including your certificate of currency for insurance. And then we never hear from them again. So insurance is the hardest thing to get in our space. In Australia, there's only really 2 main providers of it, and they kind of know who not to insure. So that's a really good leveler for inspectors, because if you do a bunch of dodgy reports, Veronica, and I've seen them, we've removed inspectors from our panel. If you do a bunch of them, eventually the insurance claims catch up to you and you're out of the industry.
Is that what sort of, you would have found lots of conflicts of interest as you've gone on this journey, right? Like, even just the vendor they've got the right idea. I've listed this property. I'm going to do the right thing by buyers. I'm going to put it on the platform so they can share on the cost. But then they do the report and they're, I didn't realize that there was all these things wrong with the property. cancel that. Let's flip it back on the buyers and hope a buyer buys it without doing a building and pest. Like, do you still allow, and all real estate agents to be like, hang on a sec, that's not a good idea. Let's not go live on that one. How does that all work? Is it an optional thing? Like, is it, you know what, if you engage it, we're going to make that public knowledge.
Yeah, once they've ordered the report and started, it's done. They've kind of paid for it. Some vendors will occasionally, and they're probably I say to agents, if you've got a vendor who's built their own house, please don't use our product, because it's like telling someone their baby's ugly. You just can't do it. Some vendors, they're probably the trickier conversations we have internally of where like, this isn't right, and they'll say, look, I don't want to make this available. That does, and I'm talking about a small percentage, but it does happen. They don't make it available in New South Wales. Agents still have to say, look, there was a report done, but it's not available. That's the law in New South Wales. But everywhere else, there's they can just close it out and say that's not going to be made available to buyers and buyer beware. But for the most part, agents, once they've used it, I won't name the agent, but early days, this is like month 1, where I was reading every single report that came onto the platform. I was so anxious and like, what's going on? What if it says this? What if it says that? Like, yeah. And then, as they normally do, like they come back with quite a few major defects. And I called up this agent and some agents would call because it was quite new, the idea. It might not seem it now, but when we started in 2015, it wasn't very common for agents to get these up front. So we were convincing agents to change their behaviours. They were doing it, and then a bad, verticommerce report was coming on the property, and then they'd call and go, what the hell's this? There's so many problems here. You've caused more problems than you're solving. And I was like, oh no, does this business actually work? I don't know, have I just got in over my head? But I remember this agent just never called me, and he had like 4 or 5, and I was like, geez, these are some tricky ones. So I called him and was like, hey, like I've read this report on this house. Like this house is bad. Like this house is in a bit of trouble. I go, how come you haven't just called out of interest? He goes, Rhys, I couldn't care less what the report says. I'm either negotiating with the buyers if it's a great report and it's all good, or if there's a lot of problems, then I've got to have an honest conversation with the vendor because the reserve's probably got to be come down by about 50 grand. I was like, wow, if everyone had that attitude, my business would be flying. But yeah, so you do have the tricky chats with the vendor initially.
So when we order bank valuations, it's completely random, right? We can't say, hey, let's use this valuer who we know is a little bit more aggressive with their valuation, or one.
You can if you're a developer.
Yeah, okay, yeah. True, but I probably, with sort of this, is the agent picking the building and pest inspector at all, or is it completely random? And because then it takes away that, hey, I'm just going to use my mate who doesn't ever check under the house or doesn't ever go in the roof and just pretends that everything, I can't access anything, and puts all these disclaimers on it.
Yeah, it's not completely. We've obviously got inspectors who service certain postcodes. We'll say, look, here's the ones we recommend for X, Y, Z postcode. Like for the popular areas of Sydney, we might have 4 or 5 options, but in some areas we've got one inspector. So it's like, well, here's the inspector that we use to service South Yarra or wherever we are. So no, the agent will have consistency of the inspector turning up. As I said, the main thing on those ones who, you might think, I know, Veronica, you've probably had this experience as a buyer's agent where you think, oh, I don't know about that inspector. I just don't see the longevity of their businesses lasting if they continually do these things, just because I've seen, and I can't name these people for obvious reasons, but I've seen inspectors get done on insurance and then they're out. Like as soon as you lose your insurance, you can't do it, and that's their livelihood. So they run a very big risk playing this game for more than a few years if they want to do the inverted commas dodgy inspections.
There's one I'm watching with great interest. The first time I saw this fellow, he was at the back of a house. So he was doing the building inspection while I was getting through all the photos being taken. Sometimes buyers agents get that little early look. And I saw him pulling at a sheet at the back of this old house that I sort of on the wall, and I sort of looked at it, thought, well, the vintage of that sheet could be asbestos. And I said to him, mate, can you just not do that while I'm around, please? And he looked at me and he said words to this effect, and I still wish I'd actually recorded him or at least remembered exactly his words. It was along the lines of, mate, that's just a furphy. And I'm like, furphy yourself away. I don't want to go anywhere near you. I'm not willing to take the risk. So I went back inside. I thought, that guy's an idiot. So I asked the agent, who is this guy? Tells me his name, and I'm like, right, that guy, we will never be purchasing an inspection report from that guy. So that was sort of it. We just gave him a wide berth. We told the agents, no, we won't buy that one. We'll get our own. Look, sometimes we do buy the ones that the agent has because we know that inspector, but if we don't know them, we'll get our own. But anyway, in this particular case, we will give him a wide berth. Then one time I went through a property that he'd done an inspection on, and I wouldn't even download the free ones that he did. And our client did, though. Our client downloaded the free one. And this particular agent likes to give free reports out. And we happened to get our inspector that we quite like, one of them, he works for the same franchise, so his reports are exactly the same format. And when he went through, he said, look, the bathrooms in this house, both of them downstairs, have rotten through the waterproofing has failed in both of them. And it's not long before you're going to lose your floor. So they're going to disappear. They really need urgent work. And I went, oh, this would be quite interesting. And the client said, when she got the report, she said, oh, I looked at the original one that the agent gave, and their inspector said that they couldn't get access to the subfloor. So I'm like, interesting. So I said, can you send it to me? So she sends me the report, and I lined them up side by side. The differences were alarming. And I went back to the agent and I did a little report comparing. That wasn't the least of it. There was heaps more that they just hadn't gone into areas. I've stood in a house once while he was there, and I'm standing on the trapdoor, and I asked him, I just said, what's the subfloor like? He says, you can't get under there. And I've looked down at my feet literally and went, what, you can't open that? He's just like, oh, maybe I could. Anyway, I put this to the agent and I said, you guys are offering this report for free. So it's actually marketing collateral. It'd be interesting to know how ACCC would view this, because this isn't actually you outsourcing and somebody paying for a report. This is you providing it free as effectively marketing collateral. And look how wrong it is. Anyway, they went ahead and got the original guy to redo his inspection, and remarkably, it looked surprisingly like ours. And so at least then all the buyers were properly informed. But that is a problem with any inspectors, I guess, but certainly when you've got inspectors that have differences in terms of their work ethic.
I've never seen two inspection reports on the same property look exactly the same, because, as I said, sorry, I'm not necessarily saying. I would just, my guess is that inspector won't last as long in the industry.
He's still there, and sales agents love him, and he's still on your platform, and sales agents love him precisely because he's super quick and super lacking in detail.
Yeah. And do you think is there like a real conflict there? I mean, just because you watch the industry, right? So you're in the industry, but you're not in the industry, right? So there's a huge conflict there, right? The agents loves the reports that are nice and easy, right? The things that, the big defects. And if the valuer gets a lot of their work from the agent, they don't want to upset the agent, because the agents in their area control 80% of the sales, right? So if they just keep on, whereas if they do a few bad reports, they almost, eat the bite the hands that feeds them. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would just say I don't find that with agents as much as probably the wider public would think. Like, I've seen thousands and thousands and thousands of reports of properties which have not rinse the property is the wrong word to use, but that have found the major defects in the property that a buyer would want to know about, and the agents don't care. They're like, look, I'm trying to be a transparent agent. Think about how our business was built. It was off John Cunningham on the Northern Beaches saying, I want to be more transparent with buyers coming through my open homes. Yeah. And I don't know if you know John, but
yep, he's been on the show. Yeah, we know him well.
He's the least dodgy human being you could probably come across. So, and we said, cool. So we put some inspectors forward. I know all those inspectors well because they're the kind of first batch on our panel. So I just naturally know them better than others. And they're doing, reports that you'd get if you were the buyer. They're exactly the same. There's no kind of favour. Just here's the state of the property. So I would say those bad eggs are in the minority for sure. And as I said, we have removed inspectors from our panel who, we heard were doing the 5-10 minute inspections. We kind of watched them for a little bit and then we're like, okay, you're off.
It'd be really easy for you to do that because you've got, what a good building and pest report is, right? Like you could easily overlay some type of, I don't know, AI, you probably didn't be AI, it's just machine learning or reading it right and going, look, you've covered 80 or 90% of what usually is in a good report, but you put in quite a lot of disclaimers, right? Or this one's actually super comprehensive. It's in terms of the photos and without having to like individually analyze it. And then you could rank them based on the quality of the reports. Is that the way you're heading or?
What we're going towards, and this is what I tell people when they download reports, I'm like, did they get into the roof? And did they get under the house?
Yeah.
And if they didn't, could you?
Yeah.
Because that's a pretty clean way to see if the person did a proper job. Now, if it's, concrete slab or, whatever, obviously you don't get under the house. But if you could get under the house and you could get into the roof and you didn't, that would be something where I'd be going back to the agent. And Veronica, I know you paid for your own report, but I'd be going back to the agent and say, look, I'm not comfortable going forward with this property unless you get an inspector. Yes, I've downloaded it for free. I get it. But I'm not comfortable unless you get an inspector back out there and get under the house and into the roof to check those two areas, because they will do, for the most part, they're like, oh, I could have got under there. Or, if we just move a cabinet or a couch or whatever I can. That's kind of what I put as my barometer of whether, it's a report I'm pressing on with. But I do think I know it's the minority, but that is a good little tell. If you're not seeing them get under the house into the roof, that they probably haven't spent the time that they needed to there.
The problem is, though, someone's still got to spend money to get a report first before they work out whether they're going to rely on that report or not. And then there's sunk cost bias, and we're humans we're a fallible bunch. We think, oh, we've already bought one, we should try to make this one work. Squash that round peg into a square hole, or the other way around. It does seem that the platform obviously is trying to solve a number of different problems for a number of different. You've got stakeholders that are sometimes at odds with each other, right? So that makes it interesting. As I said, reading your reviews it was quite clear that that's the case in your review. So I love the fact that you're thinking about having a rating system for inspectors within your platform. And what I would suggest or recommend or ask for is that you didn't allow agents to make reviews for inspectors, because the agents have a different requirement of an inspector than a consumer does. And regardless of bias, forget bias.
Yeah, no, that's a suggestion. We're going to make it so, we've scoped it out. You have to have downloaded a report to make a review. So, I know sometimes on Google, businesses will just send, all their mates, go, hey, can you rate my business? And
I know, it sucks.
And you might get, 40, 50 people, and then it's like, cool, now you're off to a flyer and you get good SEO and SEM.
Yeah.
We've got, no, you have to do the review in your login before you bid. You only have a login if you download a report. So that was definitely one thing we wanted to do, is to make sure it was genuine people. But yeah, not having the agents is I actually think we'll do that.
And from my experience, Veronica, I have lots more experience in this as well, right? But, some of the insights you get isn't on the report. It's the conversation you have with the inspector once you get the report. And, you sort of get the real warts and all, and their real, personal opinion and things they'd love to put in the report, but they maybe, put a disclaimer in there, right? And is that sort of something you still allow people who've got the reports to call the inspectors? And
definitely, yeah. If you pay for a report, you've got access to call the inspector, and we recommend it. I'd say I just go back to Chris, sometimes the problem we run into with buyers, and this happens occasionally with, very, very, thorough, meticulous inspectors, they just come up to a good property. And so they come up to a good property and they go, cool, there's actually no major defects, like 3 or 4 minor defects, and here's the report. And then someone pays for that and goes, why did I pay for this, terrible, this has told me nothing. Like,
yeah.
No, it's told you it's a good property, and you should go ahead with it. So that's a funny, issue we also run into on the buy side, which is like,
yeah,
it's can't win on that buyer side. But
That is a good point, actually, because, we know that even with our own inspectors that we use a lot. And when one of them will come up to us with, it's a good one, I'd buy it, we know, and we actually we say that to a client, look, the inspector said that they let their daughter buy it or they'd buy it, because we know that that's unusual, that you would get something so clean like that and so good and so well maintained. And it's about context, though, isn't it? The individual buyer tends to not have had, as many building inspections as we have. But I think, too, one of the quite common refrains in those one-star reviews you had was around the accessibility of the inspector. So you recommend it, and I'm gathering you recommend to the inspectors that they make themselves available as well, but clearly not everyone does.
So, yeah, that obviously we read out reviews pretty heavily, and that thankfully it actually helps with developing product.
Yeah, for
sure. So you might have noticed, Veronica, if you have downloaded a report the last month, we've got book a call with the inspector.
Yeah.
And so now that they can book that in and we can actually track if they've asked for that call, we're building out kind of, okay, put your questions down in writing. A lot of inspectors don't prefer to answer in email because there is, they don't want to be in court and say, oh, the inspector told me this over the phone. And generally that, that gets a bit messy. So book a call is a function we've just launched. We're going to have, type your questions in, and then we'll track, which inspectors are getting back to those buyers, how quickly they are. And that, it sounds like that's, if any inspectors are listening, that's extra work for us.
Time consuming, yeah.
It's actually firstly, if we can track the questions that are being asked, we might be able to answer them for the inspectors. So that's one part of it. So we can take that admin off the inspector. Secondly, though, there's, we don't want to race to the bottom here on prices for inspectors. And if they can show that they're adding that value of, hey, we pick up the call, we nurture you through the questions you've got, then it can support people saying, well, there is value to this and I will pay for that value. So it's about supporting prices as well as, buyers getting everything they need.
I mean, lots of industries, there's rules and regulations, right? And if you break the rules, you're going to get written off the list, right? So for the inspectors, right, you said they're not going to lose their license, but the number of inspectors out there and how many actually get, striked off each year and how many actually go through court and, people could actually make claims on the reports. Like, I don't know, like in your experience, like is a buyer really protected or is the inspector really unlikely to get in any trouble and any claim on their PI and likely to get striked off?
I'm so glad you kept talking in because I was about to say something and then I was like, if I'd said that on a podcast, it would be the stupidest thing to say out loud. But I was going to say, you can call some of the, I know, and you can call some of the major owners of the bigger inspection groups about how often they're in court or how often they're paying out claims.
Yeah.
It happens a lot. And not to the point where a lot would be, if we're doing 40,000, let's say there's 500,000 listings a year, there's probably 300,000 inspection reports done, from individuals and our platform. A lot is probably a couple of thousand claims a year, but they go through and people have been paid out. Like we've seen inspectors have to pay out on ones that have gone through our marketplace, and we built it so that everyone is protected so that they can make a claim. But yeah, people do say the terms and conditions are pretty, disclaim for everything. I just be clear, you can't disclaim away your responsibilities as a service provider. So I could write in my website, hey, you can never contact us about this, but the courts might have a very different view of that. So the terms and conditions are definitely, there, but really the building and pest, the main thing is the Australian standards. So if you haven't met the Australian standards, then that's, can get yourself in a bit of trouble.
I'm on a personal mission to help more people make better property decisions. And you can find out all about what I'm working on at veronicamorgan.com.au. And there you'll find resources for first home buyers, details about my buyer's agent mentoring program, access to suburb help for investors, or if you're looking to buy your dream home or an investment property in Sydney's inner west, eastern suburbs or lower North Shore, you can connect with my team at Good Deeds Property Buyers.
If you're thinking about buying your first home, upgrading to a new one, or purchasing an investment property anywhere in Australia, We would love to carefully guide you through this journey and importantly get the finance right. Please reach out via our website, wealthful.com.au.
Don't forget that you can download our free full or forecaster report. Which experts can you trust to get it right? theelephantintheroom.com.au.
Let's talk about standards, because basically there's obviously no standard for requirement for insurance because inspectors are out there without it. So what are the Australian standards for building and pest inspection?
So yeah, there are definitely inspectors out there without insurance. So if you're not buying a report out on our platform, which I know a lot of people do, that's absolutely fine. First thing I'd say is, can you please show me your certificate of currency before you buy it? Because that would be a worry for me, certainly. In terms of the requirements, it's actually the insurers that are dictating the requirements now, because from their point of view, they want less claims. They're paying out on these claims. They have to get lawyers involved. It's not a high margin business, the building and pest strata report insurance space. So they set a lot of the requirements. But in Queensland, you do need a QBCC license. So they used to have a license requirement in New South Wales. I think it was a bit over 20 years ago now, but they removed that. But the insurers are basically the ones saying, yeah, show us that you've got 5 years building experience, or show us that you've got 5 years, pest experience, before we'll even entertain, insuring you.
All right, so the PI insurers are starting to put some standards in place so that they can save on their claims, which makes perfect sense. And in the absence of any actual, regulation from governments or other bodies, what about on the strata side? Because we know that in strata there's no, and like everything, there's legislation it's different in every state, particularly with strata, and there's actually no standards for record keeping. I think in New South Wales, there's legislation going through at the moment which is going to make digital record keeping mandatory, but that's not retrospective. So that will change things, obviously. But in terms of that lack of standardisation of A, how records are kept, B, what records are kept, and C, whether they're available or not at the time that an inspector is there inspecting those records for a report. Oh, and then D, the actual ability of the inspector themselves. So you've got sort of 4 variables right there. What are you're talking about, standards and transparency and all the rest of it, and accountability, and even be able to review these inspectors. What are you proposing putting forward, sort of a standard format that you're requesting? Is that what you're suggesting?
I'll put 2 things out there on that, Veronica. One, with the standard of records, it must be really hard for strata managers to do it, because yes, the standard of records can be so, vary so much that, inspectors turn up, a panel of inspectors turn up and they're like, they didn't have this, that, and the other. And I'm like, how do they not have the minutes of meeting, or how do they miss having their insurances there? Surely that's just the standard that you'd have. So unfortunately, that's a little bit out of our control, and probably more Australia Manager Association thing. And I'm sure there's reasons. I mean, I know a lot of people who work at these companies, they're good people, they try their best. It's not like they're actively going, how do I have crappy records? They just, some of them do. And so that's, a little bit out of control. One thing in our control, definitely something it was this morning I was speaking to a strata inspector about this. So we're building out report writing software for strata inspectors so that we can have a standardised form, so that going to that point, Veronica, if one inspector provides this type of report, this type of report, we just want to say, look, this is the strata inspector template for the state, and for it's growing quite well in Queensland and Victoria as well. But we want to say, whenever you download a report, this is what you get, and it'll show what important documents are missing, and be very, very clear on that. And the inspector this morning, we thought there might be some pushback from our marketplace of inspectors, but there's been an incredibly positive feedback about it. The inspector this morning said, I'm really excited to do this because people think the strata inspection space is a bit of a cowboy industry where it's like, who does it? Is an accountant? Is it a lawyer? Is it just, anyone who wants to pick up and decide they're doing it? And there is an element of that. He said, but at least if there's this is what I get every time, buyers going to go, okay, well, this is the value. And there's not like, one template here, another template there. It's like, this is the report. And we do close to 50% of strata reports in New South Wales. So I think with that template out there, it should lift the standard and lift the standard and the consistency of what buyers are getting in that inspection space.
It's certainly in my business, for example, and obviously we're used to seeing all the myriad of different formats of these reports. So we've got our own pro forma that we use, which is like a filter that we put every report through to see what's missing. And it's extraordinarily time consuming and frustrating. But we know what to look for. We know it should be in there. We know when it's missing that it is missing. Whereas most people, they don't realise, and they'll get one strata report, they check the sinking fund or the capital works fund balances, and that's pretty much all they do. Maybe read the last minutes, because it's overwhelming and it's basically outside of most people's wheelhouse. So they've got no concept of what they're even reading. They're like, glaze over, I got it. That's good, isn't it? It's and this is a problem with a lot of due diligence, though. Basically, most people think the only due diligence they've got to do is get a contract review, get a strata report or a building and pest inspection, and their pre-approval check with their broker, they're pre-approved, and bang, they're good to go. They don't realise that there's a hell of a lot more involved. And then you get these things, and they just scratch the surface as far as I'm concerned in terms of due diligence. But you get these things, you get these documents, and then what? Because do you know how to read the building and pest inspection report that you've been given? Do you know how to read that strata report? Or do you know your contract review? I notice you're offering those now. And I think, oh my God, I can't think of anything worse in many regards, because I just think, how does a buyer know whether that's a good review or not?
That's why buyers agents are booming. The requests for...
That's maybe one of the reasons, but unfortunately, most buyers agents don't know this stuff either, because unfortunately, you don't learn it in buyers agent school, because you learn how to be a sales agent in buyers agent school. But anyway, that's a whole topic for another podcast. And are you looking at becoming a marketplace of buyers agents as well? I imagine that's probably next on your agenda, is it?
Yeah. So the next thing is on that, and again, transparency. Who can actually do the job well. I know there's, like any industry, there's great people in the industry and there's not so great people in the industry. We're hoping to elevate and be transparent and bring it all to the forefront. And the feedback we get from clients is they want this. They wanted it yesterday, and unfortunately they don't realise how hard it is to build tech. But we are hopefully going to, I would say our conveyancing will be first. Should launch hopefully in, actually I'm not going to say this on a podcast because it'll be 3 months after and someone will say, conveyancing will be first, and we'll have some buyers agent offerings for those agents who are doing well in their postcodes. So I don't believe, and Veronica, actually I'll be interested in your thoughts here, but when we're scoping this out, we're like, I don't think you have a national provider of buyers agents, because the buyers agent who knows what they're doing in the south of Melbourne has a very different skill set and knows different things about schools and whatever else than a buyer's agent who's, in Cronulla of Sydney. Or
you got that right.
So, on right now though, like, is there any things that buyers who see a property that is using your, building and pest report, right? Is there anything like buyers can use that data, like, or knowledge of how many reports have been, downloaded, or how many, like, to actually get any litmus tests on how hot a property is, or, is that data available, or is that sort of still kept up, not transparent so the agent can pretend there's more interest than there is, or vice versa?
We can't disclose that to buyers. We can't say, like, this has been downloaded. I think our record was 101 times.
Whoa.
So we can't disclose that information, but the average is a bit over 2. So just shy of, average auction bidders, as you'd imagine. But we can't disclose on individual listing.
Yeah, okay.
There's a couple of technical that.
It would be fascinating data in terms of the temperature check of the market, because we do, we look at, for example, the portals will look at, search activity, so intent to buy versus, just browsing. you guys have got real intent to buy in certain areas, and that would be quite fascinating. I mean, I look at...
It's God, before you've been on LinkedIn, you'll see us posts about that. We have the download rates over time.
Wow.
Can't believe I haven't found that before. Well, there you go. I'll make sure I follow you there.
And we actually put up the other day how many investors. So we've got quite a unique position because we have multiple downloads on a listing, and that people tell us whether or not occupier, investor, buyer's agent, or conveyancer. So we don't offer buyer's agents or conveyancers anything. We can offer occupiers, investors, different products if they want them. But we've tracked the investors over time and just seeing how they're exiting the market over the last 2 years. It's quite a clear just downfall of investing being in there.
And do you see things that really surprise you? I mean, obviously people not doing building and pests on a property and it's still selling, or awful building and pests and they're still selling for big prices, and the person who bought it's not actually hasn't bought the report. Like, have you got any of that type of insight where you can track
what did it call, the dunce or whatever? What did it call it?
Dumbo.
The dumbo, the property dumbo. Is this have you lend me into the property dumbo?
I don't know. Hit us with your property dumbo.
It was for the listeners out there, they'd Veronica and Chris emailed you beforehand and say, just have your property dumbo ready. And I just have this person clearly in my head. I hope they're not listening. Lovely person, but they might be in the industry. But they called me a few months after buying a property, and they said, "Oh, look, there's just all these issues with the property, and I'm going to sue the inspector, but I knew you, so I just wanted to, run it past you. How do I go about it?" I was like, "Yeah, cool, mate. This happens occasionally. I'm really sorry I had a bad experience. Just let me. When did you buy the report?" He's like, "Oh, I didn't." So what do you mean you didn't buy the report? He goes, "No, I downloaded it for free." And I was like, "Yeah, so those 2 text messages and 2 emails that say pay $99, report goes into your name, and then you can rely on it, and it's in your name, so you can actually make a claim." He's like, "Yeah, no, I ignored them." It's like, yeah, amazingly, only like slightly over 20% of people pay that fee. I'm like, just pay it.
Really?
Yeah, so I'm like, oh, it's $49 for a strata and $99 for a building and pest. So like, just pay it. Like, it's $99 insurance.
Just to explain this, if no one realises what we're talking about here, is that the before you bid model, as I mentioned earlier, there's different cost models in there. Like because different inspectors charge different amounts of money, but also different agents have different arrangements where some of them they'll provide the report for free. Some of them will provide it for $29, and then if you are the successful purchaser, you top it up. Some of them, it's just a flat fee of, I don't know, $49 each or something. But at the end of the day, if it hasn't been provided by the inspector to you, then you can't make a claim on that because the report isn't in your name. And so therefore, if you want to rely on it for any reason down the track, you have to do that. And so you guys do send out a little reminder afterwards saying you just have to top up the fee. You bought the property, you want to rely on it. You got to pay a bit extra. We tell all our clients pay that little bit extra if that's the case. So this guy thought he'd sue though.
So this guy didn't. And then I was like, okay, that puts him into the Dumbo Awards. But then the
bigger Dumbo is that he thought he could still sue. He just...
No, well, it gets worse, Veronica. So I felt genuinely felt terrible because I'm like, you just don't want this to happen. People that have bought a house, they've had a bad experience, not just with us, but a bad experience buying a house. That's not something anyone wants. Then I was like, I might just read this report anyway, just because I'm just interested to see if this inspector missed anything. The report was one of the most damning reports on a property. Like, it would be in my bottom 5% that I've read. It was basically even the photo on the front, it was like a horror movie. Like, it had like the dangling bit of wood at the front. And I read it all. I was like, what? He wouldn't have even won if he did put it in his name. Like, if he paid, and then I was like, maybe he's not a dumb. He saved himself $99 because if he'd got the effort of trying to sue the inspector, he would have lost because it clearly said that this, there's all these termite problems, there's all these. So I was lost as to what he was thinking after downloading the report that was going to be different to what happened when he sold the property, because it was really clear what was wrong with it.
That's hilarious.
Did you say only 20% pay it though?
So those paid models Veronica mentioned, any paid model reports automatically in your name. You can write it. There's no
Right, okay. I thought there was an upgrade one though. You still have to pay.
No, well, you can have an extra fee if you're the successful buyer, but that's automatic. So you've already agreed.
Okay, got it.
It's all, it goes off in your name, bang, away you go.
Got it.
About 15% of our agents like the report to be downloaded for free. Each to their own. We can't dictate exactly what everyone does in this world. But with those ones, we'll then send out two emails, two texts saying, hey, if you want this in your name, pay this $99 fee. And yes, only just over 20% of people do it. And I like, man, it's $99. You just bought $1 million house. Just pay that. At least give yourself the option if, you move in and it's there. But anyway, that would be a strong takeaway from this if you do. That's
20% of actual properties. Like, it's not, because I could probably have 4 or 5 buyers on it, right? So if it's 20% of people who downloaded it.
Only one person gets, so we find this just while we said, so it's only one person gets offered, and of all those thousands we do, only 20% for that model pay that fee. And I just think it's crazy town, but I mean.
Well, that's 80% of people are dumbos. Yeah.
That's classic.
And what about like people who don't, like the number of people who just never, like a property comes on your platform, but then no one downloads your report? Like what percentage of sales?
We average a bit shy of the auction clearance rate. But you think about all those properties that pass in, we get a lot with 0 downloads, but the average is multiple. So when you take into those zeros, you take into that 101, and the average is multiple downloads.
So, but then how many properties sell without any downloads?
Well, we get the successful buyer downloading the report 72% of the time. Now, if anyone knows, I'm sure Domain and REA do know this, but no one can give me a straight answer of how many properties pass in and don't sell. Do you know that, Veronica? Does anyone, Chris? Anyway, whatever it is. So 72%. Plus,
it's a very small percentage.
Probably
it's a very small percentage. It is percentage, but might be 2% or something like that. Like, it's not big.
So it's probably 3 in 5 properties that are sold will get the successful buyer downloading the report, and the other corner either getting their own or just saying, I'm not going to get one. Which,
do you have any idea of how many people are just doubling it up for the report? Like Veronica's story that she shared around someone not going in the subfloor was the exact experience we had recently, and where the report they had, and I'm not sure if it was for your software or not, but they had a report from the agent. They on that they said they couldn't get into subfloor, they couldn't get the bathrooms. It was down south. It was like north of Wollongong. It was like $3 million plus house. And they got their own person to go through. And it was actually a mate of a mate or some builder. I don't know if he was an inspector. And they had some tool to go down, like a little camera tool. And because they felt that something could be wrong, and then they figured out that both bathrooms were shot. Exactly the same story as you, Veronica. I was like, in my head, I was thinking. Do you find that is there, how many people are going for another building in pest? If they think yours isn't great, do you have any idea of how many people are doing it?
Yeah, we did a poll of agents who use our product and asked a few questions, including that. I think about 6% are being inspected by another inspectorate. So that takes it up to about 81%, and then you've got 1 in 5 people who just don't get inspection reports, which maybe they're knocking the place over, or I don't know. To be fair, some people have a mate who's an engineer or builder or whatever, and they walk through and make their own assessment. So that probably makes up the majority of the rest.
I started with a really wrong question with this podcast because I was more interested in how the vendors and the agents' mindset to the behavior changes she spoke about, right? So, like, what are you still getting pushback from any, like, particular, the reason agent versus the city agent, or that are like are willing to, or the vendors, like certain vendors in certain areas, like, no, I'm not paying for anything. Like, that's up to the buyers. Like, are you certain pockets of the country you're really struggling to crack, or
Yeah, I would say, Victoria's a hard market to crack. I'm not sure. Generally, the agents down here are lovely to chat to when they get it, but I don't know, they just can't. Like, I would have thought that would be the easiest to crack because it's like a big transparency piece, right? But, we're getting there slowly, but it's just not, as fast as we'd like. So, that's definitely an area that we'd like to be going faster at. In terms of the conversation, it's pretty simple. Like, the data is clear that more people turn up to auction when you've got a cheaper report there, which, because a lot of people hate auctions, right? They spend $600. It's out. They're like, I'm not doing auctions anymore. I'm just doing private treaty. So if you're an auction agent, you're not doing this. I think it's crazy. And then for the private treaty agents, you in a lot of states, I guess besides WA probably, but you want as little clauses as possible in the subject to, at the end, subject to finance, subject to building and pest. We'll just get a report up front, remove that clause. Agents who do see subject to offers go down by, around 60%. So they don't get into that conversation, Chris, where you're like, cool, property's worth $800,000. I got this buyer. How good's that? Cooling off. They get a building and pest. They find all these issues. Oh, sorry, we're chipping 30 off it. Vendors had a shocking time. Agents had a shocking time. Maybe that buyer bails. We're going to the underbidder. It's just the crap experiences for everyone you could just avoid by using the product.
I mean, I can think of multiple clients recently in the last couple of months that have, purchased subjects to building and pest and then seen that and then bailed. And particularly when building costs or, it's hard to get builders, the risk of, getting something that's a bit of a dud and then having issues getting,
tradespeople
getting it fixed. Exactly. Have you got any ideas? So even if you win the agent though, is there a problem winning the vendor? Or do they just, the vendor just says, okay, well, I'm happy to take it, but the buyer has to pay anything. I'm not paying anything myself.
It's the it's the quality of the agent. If they've got a few stories of like, hey, I got extra people doing an auction and it increased the price. Will Ainsworth, good agent down at Geelong, gave us a case study the other day. He's like, if I didn't have a report, it was he sold it for $831,000. It's like, if I didn't have a report up front, we would have sold it for $799. It's $200 for the vendor. They made an extra $31,000. So you just need two case studies like that, and you just mention it as an agent, and then it's pretty easy to
sell.
Unless your vendor has built the house, in which case, please don't use our product.
It's I imagine you've really got to find one of those agencies that will champion it. I mean, it's a bit like in Sydney, Bressett Whitney is probably one of the first ones that offered free reports. So that's obviously championing, and then other agents are then forced to, if they're going to have a property that competes with the Bressett Whitney property, for instance, and the buyer's like, well, I'm going to go for that one because it's easier for me. I've got a building inspection. Then other agents are sort of forced to say to their vendors, well, look, if we want to compete with those properties, you have to start, providing a level playing field. So you can sort of see how it starts rolling out once you get that a fairly active agent working with it. But I stress for buyers, don't just assume that these are good. Any building and pest inspection is good enough, and don't assume any strata report is good enough. Even on this platform, you can see there's such a wide range. You vetted them to a degree, and God forbid anyone who doesn't qualify doesn't have insurance. All I can think of is if only 30% have insurance. You just think, and then there's such a wide variety or a spread of standards within that. God forbid, what's the rest? But I guess that's a challenge for you in expanding too, isn't it? Because, you can only expand to the degree you've got capacity, and the capacity is hamstrung by the fact you've got, limitations out there in terms of the practitioners.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't run into that too much from a volume perspective, but it's definitely something we're mindful of. We have to keep building and building tools so we get quality inspectors who are insured doing a good job. And if I could snap my fingers and have everything built perfectly tomorrow, I would. It's going to take us probably another few years to get it to, that perfect utopia. But we're trying every day.
I think everyone's got that view with tech, isn't it? Like, why can't you do this? Why can't you do this? And then you go, well, that's going to cost me $3 million in 3 years to build. So,
yeah.
And I've got about 10 other things I need to build first. So thanks for the ideas. But thanks so much for coming on as well. It is a good chat. And I do think there's a real you've got the market play there. Now, if you can just make that, the confidence in using your assessors and your inspectors are like, a really high quality, and then consumers will be like, well, there's no reason to go shop around because they actually don't know who to speak to. That's one of their biggest challenges. And, one of the reasons we work with buyer's agents do know that, right? They have got their preferred inspectors, and I feel like that stops them. That could be a great insurance policy in itself. Stop buying a dud because they went to the wrong inspector. We see that all the time.
And sorry to put this on you, Veronica, because I know you're one of these, but you could make the same argument. Make sure you get the right buyer's agent, because the wrong buyer's agent will get the dodgy inspector because they just want to
10,000%.
You will never get an argument from me on that one. I'm horrified at the low standard of a lot of buyer's agents out there. So yes,
absolutely.
And I liked, and just I know we kind of went down that path. And I was more than happy to. I mentioned before go down it, but I would really like to highlight that we do vet our inspectors for insurance. That is probably the biggest hurdle they need to jump, and we're constantly building stuff to make it more transparent for buyers. So I would like to think that our marketplace is, as good a place as you could go to get these reports, and we'll keep building things to make it better and better.
Awesome. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for coming on, Rhys.
If you have a question that you'd like us to answer in an upcoming Q&A episode, you can send us a voicemail or written question via the website, theelephantintheroom.com.au, or you can email us directly at questions@theelephantintheroom.com.au. If you like what you're hearing, please share this episode with others you feel would benefit. And while you're at it, why not leave us an iTunes review? 5 stars would be great. I know that sounds a bit cringy, but we have it on good authority that every review helps make it easier for other people to find out about us and hear what our amazing guests have to say.